Can you guys help me okay? All right, cool. All right, so yeah, thanks for coming to SAS Innovate. Thanks for coming to my session. And I'm going to talk about actually a very interesting topic, secure your SAS9 applications using multi-factor authentication. My name is Suyong Lee. I'm a senior manager at SAS9 Platform Division. So what I want to communicate with you today, or the main message I want you to be able to take away from my presentation, is to really 4 different areas. What exactly we're going to deliver with SAS9 for M9 in terms of multi-factor authentication, and how we implement it. And we'll talk about a few advanced topics. Then I will talk about how you'll be able to config, deploy, and use multi-factor authentication with your SAS9 for M9 environment. More specifically, I will start with give you an introduction what multi-factor authentication means. And as for the deliverables, I will talk about what's the main features we're going to deliver, what that means for hundreds of solutions and clients we have delivered with SAS9 platform. And then I'll talk about the implementation. I'll give you a review of how the SAS9 architecture looks like, and discuss different options you can enable multi-factor authentication. And of course, we're going to use SAS Logon Manager. I'll talk a lot about that. And also talk about, we want to make this easy for you to use. So we have an integration, automatic configuration with our SAS deployment wizard. In the advanced topic, I will cover things like bypass policy, and what you can do with your command line client, what you can do with your standalone client, and how you're going to, if you have integrated window authentication config with MFA, also config what that means to you. For the configuration, I'll talk about what's the recommended process you should do, and I'll give a lot of a screenshot to actually show you how the configuration works. And then I'll do a demo to use Google Authenticator. I know it's going to be a relatively long presentation, 35 minutes or so. So I want to give you a summary so you can take away from what you learned from today to use that in your future SAS9 for M9 deployment. So you may be thinking, oh, I'm familiar with this, right? You go to your bank, for example, to log in to your account. You'll get challenged with username, password. Once you type it in, you're going to have an option to get a token either to your text, to your phone, or to your email, right? So once you get a token, you input that token, you submit, you can log in. So everybody probably already familiar with that process. There's a little bit of formal definition. You can read it. I'm not going to read it. But the key thing is multi-factor authentication is much secure than single-phase authentication, right? So let's talk about specifically what we're going to deliver with SAS9 for M9, right? There's a set of key features. The first one is you all probably familiar when you use SAS application, we have a single sign-on capability, meaning when you log on to one SAS application, when you access a lot of SAS application in the same deployment, you are not going to challenge again. You will not need to log in again. So we're going to follow that concept to provide a single point of multi-factor authentication. Once you multi-factor authenticated with one application, as long as the session is still valid, your ticket is still valid, you'll be able to stay without having to challenge again to do a multi-factor authentication to another application. We provide several authenticators. I will talk a little bit more about that later. And we also support different type of clients, right? Our customers using different type of clients, browser-based client, desktop client, SAS program, and command line client. So I'll cover a little bit more details about that later. We also support several different bypass policy. What that means is every customer have different requirement. Every situation are different. There are always some special cases you have to handle, right? So we'll cover like a bypass by group. Bypass by group. We'll talk about some of the SAS Logon endpoint. We have a policy allow you to bypass those endpoint as well. We allow you to have your SAS guest user to log in without doing multi-factor authentication. So that is the general features. Let's talk about what happened with all the solutions going to deliver on top or along with 9.9, right? So I'm putting that into two categories. One is they were going to also require their end user to do multi-factor authentication. Other category is they are not going to require you to do that with the first release of SAS 9.9. The first category include most of the browser-based applications. That cover probably 80%, 95% of the application solutions built on top of 9.9. Others like Enterprise Miner, Forecast Server, Enterprise Guide, they are standalone SAS applications, the desktop applications. In the first 9.9 release, they were not required to do multi-factor authentication, but they were going to continue to functioning if you have multi-factor authentication enabled for your environment. That's the key message, right? We want to make sure you got a multi-factor authentication capability, function, features. However, if there's a certain client does not support multi-factor authentication yet, we want them to be able to continue functioning. Later in the ship event, solution ship event, or hotfix, we'll provide those capabilities. Similar things for SAS programs, some of the SAS proc and macros, like SAS proc SOAP, proc RUA, proc HTTP, and they're going to continue functioning. They're not going to require you to do multi-factor authentication. Command line client, you can do both, depending on how you use it. I'll give you some example later. This is just a subset of solutions. Come out of M-line, they're going to require you, if you have MFA enabled, they will require you to do multi-factor authentication. All right, so we now know the features, we know what's happening to the solutions and applications. Let's talk about the implementation. So this is just give you refresh your memory, how the SAS9 architecture looks like from middle tier perspective, right? SAS9 is a multi-tier architecture. You can, depending on how you see it, you can say 3-tier or 4-tier. Client tier, middle tier, server tier, data tier, right? The client tier is very top of this diagram, the box, 4 boxes. Java client, that's Microsoft client, SAS program, that type of client, browser-based client. And then in the middle, the first one is the web server, sometimes called the load balancer. And below that, I have a 3 identical box. Those basically are 3 cluster load, right? So you have a 3 web application server. Our application is running inside those web application server. And in the middle, there's a web platform service or middle tier platform. Then all the solution built on top of that. We do have a shared memory, we have a messaging capability, and that's also in that box. And below that is basically have a separate process running for managing shared memory, for supporting the messaging information, for supporting messaging. And then we have a content repository. We also have a database repository, RDBM, relational database server. And also, the last 2 boxes on the right-hand side is the managed server and the SAS compute server, right? Those are, in this diagram, it's just 2 boxes. In the reality, there's a lot of things going on there too. but that's not the focus for this presentation. So we have this multi-tier architecture, the different entry point when somebody accesses SaaS product or SaaS environment, right? In each of these endpoints, there's a potential we're going to enable multi-factor authentication. That includes like web server, web application server, or individual applications. And I separate out SaaS environment manager because it's a little bit special. It does not go through SaaS web server. But our choice is using SaaS Logon Manager. I'll talk about that, why we're doing that in the next slide. So why SaaS Logon Manager for multi-factor authentication? And also why we're using Logon Manager with CAS, Central Authentication Service. So as I mentioned, we have SaaS Logon Manager as a single sign-on solution for all SaaS web applications. And we are using CAS to actually support that single sign-on capability. CAS is well received, is widely used. It also provides multi-factor authentication support. So that's a pretty natural integration point for us to leverage the capability CAS provide. Once that MFA is enabled at this level, then all applications as SaaS, web applications, can get multi-factor authentication capability without further work. And this is also true when you don't have a web server configured. This is also true for SaaS Environment Manager. SaaS Environment Manager also participates single sign-on with all other SaaS applications. There's additional benefit, right? We talk about we're going to leverage CAS. CAS provides something called CAS-simple, which is a self-contained solution, easy button, out of box. We leverage that, provided as a SaaS authenticator, and you get an easy button, out of box implementation without having to worry about integrating with other third-party product. We also provide another authenticator or provider called Google Authenticator. A lot of people probably using Google in their company IT infrastructure already, so we want to leverage that, okay? And also this open store for future integration. We've been people talking to us about, what about Okta? What about Do? Right? So all of the other things are actually supported by CAS. It's just a matter of time for us to integrate that with our Logon Manager. So a little bit more about the implementation. Basically, we'll have CAS for single sign-on. We have those packages. We bring in additional package which have MFA capability. We make sure they all pass the security scan, make sure they are not introduced any security vulnerabilities. And then we integrate in the code level, in the UI level, to make sure CAS Webflow work with our Logon Manager, make sure the Logon Manager CAS provide has the same look and feel from other SaaS web applications. And we also populate the database to make sure, like a Google case, data get persisted in the database, and so you don't have to register your Google Authenticate app more than once. You just need to register once. I mentioned we support 2 authenticators at 9.9 release. We support also 3 different messaging providers. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We implemented several different bypass policies. We'll provide an easy button to configure that with MFA. So MFA Authenticator, 2 of them. This is kind of a summary. SaaS Authenticator, based on CAS-simple, self-contained, no additional work you need to do, and support email, support text messaging. So text messaging is basically you need to have an account with the third-party vendors. We support 3 different messaging providers: Vonage, Twilio, Amazon SNS. We're open for any suggestion, any feedback. If you say my company working with other vendors other than what I listed over here, we would love to know that, and we'll prioritize, see whatever can support you on that. Google Authenticator, I already mentioned, is fit best if your company already using Google Authenticator for other applications. So configurations, there's two options I mentioned. You can do automatic configuration. Basically, we integrate with a SAS deployment wizard. You're probably familiar with that. That's the only or main utility you're going to install, configure your SAS application, SAS9 applications. And you do have to choose option of a custom option, and you need to choose which authenticator you're going to use, and you need to choose email or text, and I'll show you some of the screenshots on that. And you can also use the manual configuration, which is also useful, especially if you're doing the UIP. Your UIP, you change you update your SAS environment from prior line for M9 to 9 for M9, or from M9 to M9. Then you will need to do manual configuration. And also, if you do the out of box without MFA, you want to change it, you need to do that too. So we provide that as a documentation. Also, a few advanced topics, bypass, command line, standalone client, MFA, and IWA. So this part of the presentation is an advanced topic, a little bit involved. If you feel a little bit overwhelming, don't worry about it. Just get a general idea. When you need it, you can always go back to this slide to get some more details. But I'll go through them. So first thing is bypass by policy. Basically, we're saying, oh, I have some users that are special. I don't want them to also do second factor authentication, right? So we provide that capability. You define them in a certain group, and that user will not need to do multi-factor authentication. And for the Logon manager, there's two main entry point, v1/ticket and SAS Logon in the next slide. For those endpoint, different users have different usage, and we provide a way for them to bypass those endpoints. Right, the first one for v1 ticket is through IP addresses of your applications running on. So for the SAS Logon login, this endpoint, you can use bypass by group policy to avoid certain people have to do multi-factor authentication when they access this endpoint. Guest users, if you use guest user, we have a way for you to not require that guest user to participate multi-factor authentication. Command line, this is a busy slide. Again, get some general ideas. The key messaging is you can use like curl command to access the SAS applications. And when multi-factor authentication enabled, you got two additional steps to do. First thing is you need to use this curl command to access endpoint to trigger a MFA token being sent to you. In this case, for example, it's email. You get a token, you use that token, and issue another curl command to get a ticket grant cookie, TGC, right? That's the second step. The third step is you get the TGC, and then you get the ticket grant ticket. And then use ticket grant ticket. That's the fourth step to get service ticket. You use the service ticket to access your applications. Okay? So next slide is for the standalone client. Again, this is used for like enterprise miner type of client, forecast server type of client. The main message is if you have that type of client, you want to make your client to be a little bit smarter, to work with the environment without multi-factor authentication, to work with the environment if server have multi-factor authentication enabled. You want to make sure your client to participate in multi-factor authentication or not participate in multi-factor authentication, depending on your specific needs. And we also support like other features that's already supported by current enterprise miner forecast server. For example, you can use plain password, you can use encrypted password. So what about if you have IWA, integrated window authentication config, and you also want to use multi-factor authentication? There's a good news or bad news. The bad news is you can't use, for browser-based application, you cannot use SAS Authenticator. You have to use Google Authenticator. For enterprise miner standard around application, pretty much you cannot do them both together. But you do have an option in the enterprise miner that allow you to allow individual user to say, I don't want to use integrate window authentication. In that case, if you have Google Authenticator, that's still going to work. The one I'm talking about is this enterprise miner Logon screen. There's a checkbox, the right circle by the right circle. You say whether you want to do the integrated authentication or not. If you uncheck it, then if you have a Google Authenticator, that's still going to work. So that's how you log in. So we talk about let's talk about how you configure and use multi-factor authentication. Right, the high-level recommendation is you want first to decide what authenticator you want to use. You want to decide if you use SAS Authenticator, whether you're going to support email, text messaging, or both. If you want to support text messaging, you need to decide which one you're going to use. Create an account with that provider if you don't have one. Collect certain information. I'll show you a screenshot for some examples. You can also, if you use Google Authenticator, configuration-wise, it's much simpler. And you can use SDW. You can do manual configuration. And if you use Google SAS Authenticator, because now you're going to send in email or text messaging to the client, you need to have email and the phone number defined in the metadata server for that client. Okay, then you can basically accessing your application. I'll do a demo for that. It's really straightforward and simple. So this is just an example. Let's say you want to use Phonage as a text messaging provider, right? You will go to Phonage to create an account, sign up, and then you got some trial credit. You can try it out, and you can access the Phonage API dashboard to get API key and the secret. So the API key and the secret are the one you will need to set up your multi-factor authentication with SAS environment. And I give you two examples. You can try out those APIs before your registrations before you're actually using it, right? Two ways. One is you can use their UI to send a text message. You can use a curl command to test out to send a message. So just make sure your API key and the secret actually work. Now I'm going to go through SDW screen to show you how you can actually configure multi-factor authentication. We'll start with this option, choose different configuration levels. Express typical customer. Multi-factor authentication only available in the customer option, so you have to choose that option. So in the next slides, I basically have two screenshots. Left-hand side is the SDW screen. The right-hand side is a help screen of that screen in the SDW. So the first question is, do you want a multi-factor authentication? You say yes, then do you want Google? Do you want a SAS Authenticator? Then if you say, okay, I want a SAS Authenticator, then you're going to say how long you want your token to be valid, before it expire. What is the size of the token? We do have a validation. In case you type in some value out of the range, you will be required to retype it. You can choose email, you can choose text, you can choose both. If you choose email, you need to provide some server information, typical questions. And if you choose the text messaging as well, then we have an option for you to choose which text messaging provider you want to use. Say you want to use Phonage, right? So next screen is the API key and the secret. I mentioned you can get that when you sign up with Phonage account. And what's your phone number to send that message? That's also registered when you register your account. And that's it. So you start your SDW. Once it's done, it's all configured. So the next thing is now you want to have your client user to start send email or receive text messaging. So you use this SAS management console to add user email to the metadata server. Same thing for the phone number. Now, this is for the Google Authenticator. Very simple question, and it's really the, two strings to identify your registration. So now I'm going to do a demo to show you how to do the single sign-on for multi-factor authentication for Google Authenticator. So I have this Google Authenticator already installed on my machine, on my phone. So, and I'm going to do is to switch this to my browser. I'm going to do, let me sign out first. I'm going to go in to access one of my favorite platform application. Let's say stored process. So that's one of the machines running at SAS campus. And so I'm going to say I want to access this SAS stored process server. You get this Logon screen. You're all familiar with that, right? So I'm going to use, I have a couple of users defined in the metadata server. I'm going to pick one I have never used so I can show you the registration process. So I'm going to go to MFA user 5. Okay, and this is the internal user, so it's going to be SAS PW, and type in my password, and oh yeah, sorry. This machine I only have MFA user 1 and 2 defined. So now I'm getting this screen. Let me cancel that out. Basically, give me a QR code, right? So I'm going to use my phone to say I'm going to scan this QR code. So that user now is showing up on my phone. So I register that user. And I'm going to say confirm, I already registered. Then it's going to say, okay, and confirm your registration, type in your code. So I'm going to type in the code, 823280. And that doesn't really matter. So I'm going to register. And, oh, let me do it again. It said it's not registered. I think my registration code is expired. 33647. So Google Authenticator, the code is keep flashing. You have to do that real quickly. 695. What? Nine one 0690. Something is going on. Let me try another environment here. this is another identical environment. I'm going to, again, this time I'm going to use MFA user 5. SAS PW go for THSS. So it's going to ask me to do the registration. So I'm going to go ahead, again, scan the QR code, register, confirm that. I'm going to type this code real quick, 787094, and then register. All right, now this works, right? So I registered. I'm getting a lot of code for me to sign in. So I'm going to say 003195. All right, cool. So I'm getting to my applications. Now I'm going to get to my slides, and so basically conclusion. So what I kind of communicate with you today is what our main features, what happened with our solution and the client, desktop clients, and how that's implemented, right? We use SAS Logon Manager with CAS. I talk about several bypass policy, several advanced topics, and I show you the demo, go through the SDW screen. And hopefully you can take this information with you, and when you need to start deploy 9.9, enable MFA, that will be handy for you. So what's next? So we're going to do some more automation. We'll support other type of authenticators, providers. We're going to support UIP for multi-factor authentication. And we're also working on a significant effort on support multi-factor authentication on the server tier, right? Most of the things I'm talking about is middle tier centric. We have a server tier multi-factor authentication. It's ongoing, it's well coming up pretty soon. In the middle tier, we're also investigating whether we should support MFA in the web server layer. I show you the architecture, different options, right? Some customers may prefer to integrate with web server with their IT infrastructure. So we're looking at that. That's the future. One last thing I want to mention is we do have MA support on ZOS. We use IBM ZMFA to support multi-factor authentication on ZOS environment. That's ready. That's available for 9.9. So that's all the information I have. Thank you very much again for coming to my session. And I'm going to open up to see whether you have any questions.
All right, let's give Zhiyong a round of applause. Great presentation. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions in the crowd? Oh, we've got one in the back.
Thank you. Two questions. One is, when do you anticipate the delivery of this?
9.9 is going to be June timeframe, so it's coming up pretty soon.
Okay, great. Thank you. And for your Authenticator, would request Microsoft Authenticator as a backlog item. We use that heavily in our company.
Okay, sure.
So,
yeah.
If you're taking requests.
Yeah. We'll definitely
Cool.
look into feedback, right? So we'll take a note. We'll evaluate that for sure. Yeah.
All right. Do we have any more questions?
Also, let me add one more thing.
Okay.
If you have additional information, we would appreciate that. Basically, say how you use Microsoft Authenticator, some more information. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be amazing. So are there any more questions in the crowd? All right. Oh, we got one more.
So I'm just wondering, with the Google Authenticator, is it actually a time-based token? So could you have scanned that code into the Microsoft Authenticator app to generate the codes?
Can you get a bit closer to the microphone?
Sorry. Is the Google Authenticator just
Yeah.
using time-based tokens? So could you have scanned that QR code into Microsoft Authenticator app and generated codes that way?
Ooh, good question. I haven't never thought about it. I don't think you can use that. I think it's more I don't think you can do that because it knows it's well, I think it knows it is coming from Google. But it's a very good question. I never tried it. I don't think you can mix and match unless it's supported. Unless like a Google Microsoft have some kind of agreement, they can support each other.
Right. Well, thank you all so much. We are at just about time, so we appreciate you all coming by. Thank you, and have a great rest of your event. We've got an awesome event for you tonight at Universal Studios. If you're sticking around, we also have a roundtable here at 6 o'clock to 6:45 for the hackathon winners. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Sure. Yeah.